This is my wife's 2003 Ford Escape V6 four-wheel drive. It's got 272,129 miles on it. Bought this car brand new from my wife in 2003, and this is the only brand new car I've ever purchased in my life. My first car was a 65 Mustang. My second car was a 66 Bronco. My third car was a 70 Mach 1 Mustang, and I bought all those cars in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. So I've always been driving cars that were at least classic cars, and bought this one brand new, you know, as a newlywed. Bought it as a present for my wife, and it's been a really good car. Say, put a lot of miles on it, and it didn't start having problems until after about 250,000 miles. So I can't complain. It's on its original engine. It's on its original transmission. I think we've done the front brakes 3 times. We've never done the rear brakes, which to me seems odd, but we've never needed to do it. So the rear brakes have never been done. Strange, I know. We've changed the alternator once. We've gone through a couple batteries. Let's see, air conditioning compressor, and then one of the air conditioning manifolds sprung a leak, so we've changed things like that, but really nothing serious. The plastic reservoir right here for the coolant sprung a pinhole leak last summer at 260 something thousand miles, and that's a real pain when that happens. When this thing has a pinhole leak and you notice coolant leaking down below it, you really need to take action, because this will appear to stay full, and while this appears to be full, your radiator will drain, and there's no cap on the radiator like an old car has, so you can't just pull the cap on your radiator to look and see how much coolant you have in your radiator. You don't find out that you're out of coolant until you overtemp on the highway, and you overtemp on the highway and this is still full. So it's really misleading, because as it drips slowly from here, the radiator keeps refueling it. I know that's odd, because that's not how old cars work, but it's a different system there, so you have to be really careful. If this thing ever leaks, buy a new one, even though it's kind of expensive. So we did do that last summer. If you've seen my other videos on YouTube, you notice that my other cars are, like I mentioned, older. Now, one problem with this 2003 Ford Escape that I notice a lot of people are having on high mileage Ford Escapes is this one. Like I said, we bought it new. We always took good care of it, but fairly recently, I'd say sometime after 250,000 miles, we noticed that if the car sat out in the rain and we drove it after it sat out in the rain, or if we'd been driving through the rain and then we sat it and parked, if the car got wet, kind of like that movie Gremlins, if it got wet, bad things would happen. And so we called it the Gremlins every time this happened. The car would get wet, the next day we would drive it, and the engine would shudder really bad, and it had a miss. Either 1 or 2 cylinders were missing. So 6-cylinder V6, we're running on 4 cylinders, maybe 5 cylinders, and it would shudder. But we didn't worry about it. The check engine light would come on and it would flash, and anytime you see a flashing check engine light, you should really stop driving it right away, because you're going to destroy your catalytic converters, and those are expensive. So of course I didn't do that. We just kept driving it. We're like, oh, Gremlins. We drove it in the rain, it got wet, and there's the Gremlins. And we would drive it into town and park it, and that would heat up the engine and burn off the water, I guess, the moisture in the coil packs or whatever was causing that. And once everything was dried out, then we'd start it up. The check engine light would be out, would be hitting on all 6 cylinders again, and it would run fine until the next time it got wet. So we stopped leaving it out in the weather, and we started just, putting it under this overhang. And then it was very rare that it would get exposed to rain, because a lot of times it's raining and, you're not at work, you're at home, and it's under the overhang, it didn't get wet. So we didn't worry too much about the Gremlins. Every once in a while they'd pop up, we'd have that flashing check engine light, and we didn't think anything of it. Until it blew, I should back up. Until all of a sudden it had terrible performance. It wouldn't want to accelerate. You'd get on the highway, you'd floor it, it wouldn't want to go at all. You'd be going like 38 miles an hour. Engine RPMs were up there, but you weren't moving forward. I thought the transmission was slipping. I honestly had no clue. It was like, you're trying to accelerate, you can't accelerate, didn't have the power it used to. Fuel economy dropped, and I figured those were all symptoms of a slipping transmission. The engine RPMs are up, but it's not transferring torque to the rear wheels. or the front wheels, I should say. It's a front-wheel drive car with the four-wheel drive option, so part-time four-wheel drive, but mostly it's a front-wheel drive, you know, V6 car with the engine in there sideways. But it turns out the reason we didn't have any power, it wasn't a slipping transmission, and I didn't discover that until it blew a hole in the EGR valve. And when it blew a hole in the EGR valve right where I'm pointing there, that showed exactly what was going on. Too much back pressure, like if somebody had stuffed something in my exhaust pipe and the exhaust couldn't get out. All that back pressure built up, and the exhaust basically it had to get out. The engine's running, that exhaust had to escape. So it blew the thin aluminum housing of this EGR valve just to get an escape, just to get a release out of the engine there. And what was clogged was the catalytic converters. And again, something I'm not used to, because this is the only new car I've ever owned. This is the only time I've ever had a car payment. 2003 until 2006 is the only time in my life I've ever had a car payment, and I've been driving cars since 1985. I just paid cash for everything else because it's an old car, and just, you know, worked on them. So this being my only new car, it's my only car with catalytic converters. None of my other cars have cats on them. So it's got a catalytic converter on this side, just right below where my hand is, right at the exhaust manifold. And the other bank of the V6 has got another catalytic converter right below that side on the exhaust manifold. And then the two exhaust manifolds, they Y into your exhaust pipe, and your exhaust pipe comes all the way down and terminates right there, you know, past two mufflers. But right about here, there's another catalytic converter if you look at your exhaust pipe. And since I clogged that catalytic converter, what I've done, until I troubleshoot this and get it fixed totally, for right now, I've temporarily bypassed that catalytic converter. So I'm not running this catalytic converter anymore, the one that was clogged, because that catalytic converter was clogged by these two catalytic converters at each exhaust manifold coming apart. And until I fix everything, once I get the fixed, the gremlins, what we call gremlins, once I get the gremlins fixed, then I'll replace both the upstream catalytic converters and the third catalytic converter that's after the Y pipe. So I'll have all new catalytic converters on it, but not until I fix the gremlins, because the problem with these gremlins, like I said, if you've got a miss on your engine and you've got that flashing check engine light, what's going to happen is you're going to end up dumping excess fuel into your upstream catalytic converters, and that fuel is going to basically tear apart your catalytic converters, melt them down, and the remains from those are going to go clog your downstream catalytic converter. And now that I've taken the downstream catalytic converter and bypassed it temporarily, now I got to watch out that I don't, you know, clog up my my muffler. So I put kind of a screen in place, like a filter, that is just a metal plate that I drilled some holes into to catch any more debris that comes from these upstream cats. Like I say, when everything's said and done and we got the gremlins fixed, then I'm going to replace all the catalytic converters and make the car correct again so that it runs like it did when it was new. But we've still got the miss. Now, we downloaded the fault code, and it shows an injector circuit fault and a misfire at number 5. Well, number 5 is really easy to get to. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this one is dead. We can run the engine and we can take this harness off, and with no harness at all, no electrical harness going to the coil pack on the number 5, it doesn't affect the engine RPM at all, because this cylinder is dead in the first place. This cylinder was already dead, so me disconnecting this has no effect. Now if I disconnect this one, it's big. You know, I can hear the RPM go down, and when I plug it back in, you can hear the RPM go up. And when I disconnect this one, I can hear the RPM go down, and when I plug it in, it goes back up. If I have them all plugged in and I disconnect this one and then I disconnect this one, theoretically when I disconnect this one I'm running on 5 cylinders, or actually when I disconnect this one I'm running on 5 cylinders, because without spark you're not going to fire on that cylinder, not at number 4. So I can disconnect this one and the RPM goes down a little bit because it's only 5 cylinders theoretically, but I've also got a good cylinder here. I can disconnect this one after this one, so both of these are gone and the RPM doesn't go down because this cylinder was already dead. But if I take this one and this one, now I'm only running on one bank, because I've only got 1, 2, and 3 firing. If I unplug this one and it makes a huge difference because this one is already dead. So what I'm trying to figure out right now is why number 5 is dead, and from what I've read online in a forum discussion on Ford Escapes that goes back to 2007, is that a lot of high mileage Ford Escapes are doing exactly what mine's doing, and it's usually water that collects right up in here around these coil on plug setups, these coil packs right here, and the moisture causes them to fail. And when the moisture causes these guys to fail, you get a misfire, which shells out your catalytic converters, which is very expensive. And if you keep driving it like that, from what I understand, it can impact your PCM, your powertrain control module, so you lose your car's computer as well. It can fry your computer, and that's rather expensive, and then you've got to get it reprogrammed when you install a new one. So all I've done so far is just changed out the coil pack and a spark plug right here, just because it was easy to get to, and that did not fix the problem. I've still got the flashing check engine light, and this cylinder is still dead. So I'm not positive if I'm getting spark here or not, but I'm going to check that, and I'm not positive if I'm getting fuel here or not. But you can get a screwdriver in to the injectors through here, and right through here you can get a long screwdriver in there, and you can touch it down to the injector that goes to number 5, and you can put your ear to the screwdriver and use it like a stethoscope, and you can hear the number 5 fuel injector clicking. So the injector, it might be clogged, but it seems to be clicking off okay, just like the others are clicking. So I'm going to check and see if I have a spark, and I need to find out if I have fuel. If I've got spark and fuel, it should run just fine. One thing I should mention is this is the factory routing for the coil units. Sometimes you'll see in the Ford discussions where somebody has a misfire on 4 and 6, and it's because this thing has been routed incorrectly. After somebody tore the engine apart and put it back together, they routed this in a logical fashion, which would be coming around this way and hooking up to 4, 5, and 6. But the factory routing is it comes this way for a crazy reason, and it hooks up to 6 first, and then 5, and then 4. But that's what the factory routing looks like, just like that. Again, I've had this car since brand new, so I know what's been done to it and what hasn't. I do want to change all the spark plugs, but before that I want to find out what's going on. Now, from the forum discussion, I've learned that almost nobody says that a fuel injector fixes this problem. So I don't believe it's a fuel injector. Those things are designed to last a really long time. And some people have said that the ECU fixed the problem, and multiple people have said that it was simply a recessed pin or a broken wire right here in the large wiring harness that goes into the ECU. And that's what I would love to find. I would love to find that it's just the wire that sends a signal to this coil pack, or the wire that sends a signal to the injector to fire. Because if it's just a broken wire up here somewhere, that would be great. I would love to just fix that and press on. And like I say, once I fix this miss in number 5 and I get this thing hitting on 6 cylinders again, then I can put the cats back on and go back to normal. And right now I'm going to turn this camera off and get chickens out of my garage.
Alright, shut it off.
Alright, so that's sparking. It's definitely sparking. You can see what I did there. Yesterday I installed a new coil pack, and this is the new coil pack, and I installed a brand new spark plug, and that's a brand new spark plug that's still down in there plugging that hole for me. But I took the old spark plug that came out of it yesterday. This is the spark plug that came out of it, and cleaned it up on the wire wheel, checked the gap, 54 thousandths gap, and it won't fire unless it's grounded. So I just used jumper cables. You can see the jumper cables, the positive side of the jumper cables aren't doing anything, and it doesn't really matter what side you use, black or what, but since I'm using it for ground, and since I'm making a video to illustrate things, I just use the black side of the cables just to connect the spark plug to a chassis ground, which simulates the spark plug being screwed into the head. Normally the cylinder head would provide the ground. So I've definitely got spark. Now the question is, do I have fuel? And like I said, all I've done so far is just change that coil pack and that spark plug. I haven't spent a lot of money yet. I bypassed the downstream catalytic converter. I completely ignored the 2 forward catalytic converters, although I assume this side for sure, this bank for sure catalytic converter is toast. Because I know one of them is toast because the remnants of it were in that downstream catalytic converter, the mid-pipe catalytic converter, this after the Y. This side catalytic converter might still be good, provided that this bank of 1, 2, and 3 never had a misfire. I'm not sure the history of this because I only recently downloaded the code and found out that it was a number 5 misfire. Like I say, normally the gremlin problem after it got wet would go away after, you know, one time driving it and letting it dry off, so we kind of ignored it, which was bad of us. But now it's solid. Now no matter what, no matter how dry it gets, the fault code stays, number 5 misfire. The engine stumbles. One guy on the forum noted that if he turned overdrive off, it fixed the problem. Well, it's interesting. If I turn overdrive off, it doesn't fix the problem. I'm still running on 5 cylinders. But what I've done is effectively driving around town, you know, 40, 45, 55 miles an hour. I've raised the RPM from, say, 1500 to 2400 RPM because my overdrive is turned off. You turn your overdrive off, it raises your RPM. Anytime you raise your RPM band in an engine that's missing on 1 cylinder, it's going to smooth out that miss and kind of mask it, disguise it a little bit. So if I drive around town with this thing with overdrive off, if you push that button on the end of your shifter lever to turn overdrive off, it does smooth out the miss, but you're only masking the problem. I've still got the flashing engine light, and I'm still dead on the number 5 cylinder. It just seems to run a little bit better with the overdrive turned off. But so anyway, I've removed this cosmetic cover and replaced the cop there, the coil on plug, and replaced a spark plug. So I haven't spent much money yet. I'm trying not to spend a lot of money, which is why I hope this troubleshooting takes me to wiring going to the PCM, and that would be ideal. But I'm not quite there yet. Still got some more things to check.
When I'm looking at the camera, it looks like an uneven firing, like it's going spark, 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 and then a pause, and then spark, spark, spark. But I think that's just the camera playing tricks on it because of, you know, the slow speed of my camera. It's not a great camera. Through the naked eye, it's sparking just fine. It's perfect. It's not missing a beat. That's number 4. I just wanted to see what number 4 would look like compared to number 5. Number 4 and number 5 are both sparking the same. Hey, sweetie, go ahead and kill the engine.
My lovely assistant. Yay. What? So this is your car, right? It's not my car?
Yeah.
Yes. These 3 are really easy to get to. Those 3, 1, 2, and 3, not so much. 4, 5, and 6, easy. 1, 2, and 3, you got to take the whole upper intake off. And so, I mean, you got these guys in the way of doing that. Your throttle cable and your cruise control cable, and you got to take that ductwork off. You've got to either remove your EGR valve or remove everything off of your EGR valve, and then that bracket back there, and some vacuum hoses and some other hoses hooked up there. A lot of things on that upper intake to get to the other 3 coil packs, you know, the 3 spark plugs, which is why it's so expensive if you pay a mechanic to change spark plugs on this engine, because having to change this off is going to be fairly time consuming. They're going to charge you for their time. Got time to change spark plugs on all of the cylinders, so as long as I'm up here messing around with coil packs on 4, 5, and 6, and since I've already put a new spark plug in number 5, I've got a brand new spark plug from the 6 that I bought, and I'll put it in number 4, and I'll put a brand new spark plug in number 6 as well. The gap on these is 54 thousandths of an inch. Alright, and I'll change the spark plug on number 6. So 4, 5, and 6 will have new spark plugs, and down the road I'll remove the upper intake and change out 1, 2, and 3 spark plugs. But again, just point out how easy this is. There's a clip right here, if you can see it, down here by my left hand. You push on this button right here, and that releases it. Gently pull the clip off because you don't want to break these plastic clips. You know, they get hot and whatnot over time. 8mm bolt right there, so you get your socket on there. And get that bolt out. And then put the bolt somewhere where you're not going to drop it down in the engine somewhere, you know. So we'll set that over here. And then just literally just pulls right out. I mean, that easy. So there's your cup, and then you got your socket, spark plug socket. Pull the spark plug out. There it is. Out of the box, it's about 56, 57. Pinch it in a little bit. A little bit more. Now it's 50. Open it up a little bit. 52. 54. Alright, and like I say, your spark plug socket will hold the spark plug. Go ahead and install it down the hole. Thread it in by hand. Always thread it in by hand. Make sure it's threaded in all the way, because you don't want to cross threads in an aluminum cylinder head. That's a terrible thing to do. Do not want to pull the cylinder head on this engine. And then run it the rest of the way in with your ratchet. And not a lot of torque on these, just snug like that. Doesn't have to be smoked in there. Like I said, it's an aluminum cylinder head. You don't want to smoke anything into an aluminum cylinder head. Then your coil goes on like that. Make sure you're lining it up there with your spark plug. Line up the bolt hole there. Clip goes right on like that. And bolt's right here. Put the bolt back in. So you can see in very little time you can change spark plugs and coil packs on 4, 5, and 6, but 1, 2, and 3 not so much. Okay, so now we're taking this bolt out of the main PCM harness here, and we'll take that out. And we'll take a look at all these pins up inside here, and we'll take the shielding off the wire harness, and we'll look at the wires for any signs of physical distress there. We pulled back the plastic shielding there, and then it's got this plastic shield on it as well that just has 4 tabs. You can get in there with a flat tip screwdriver, and you can see which way you need to pry them there. You pry them outboard to get them to unhook, and then you can pull this plastic cover off, and it just slides right over. It's got a big enough hole that it just slides right over the bolt there. This bolt that my finger's on just stays captive inside that plug. With everything removed, now we can see all the wires, and I didn't see anything obvious, nothing that's burnt or chafed, and figure out which wire it is that goes to the number 5 fuel injector, because I know number 5 is getting spark, so I'm not worried about the computer telling number 5 to spark. I know the computer's telling number 5 to spark. I need to know if the computer's telling number 5 to inject fuel. And like I say, I think I can hear it clicking away when I put a long flat tip screwdriver in there, and I listen, like it's a stethoscope, I think I can hear it clicking away. I think I can hear all 6, or at least the ones I could get to, but number 5 was one of the ones that I could get to. Keep in mind, this one right here that you can see real close, if you want to put a stethoscope on that one's actually going to number 3, and this one's actually going to number 2, and this close one here is actually going to number 1. You have to look down from the other side to see the ones going to 4, 5, and 6, because this one goes in this way, and that way to this bank over here. So if you want to get the injectors going to this bank, you got to get the ones that are coming in from this side and going in diagonally to this one. So I think I can hear pretty much everything I can get a screwdriver on. I can hear it clicking away. So I think the computer's telling it to send fuel. Maybe all I've got is a clogged injector. I was hoping to find maybe a broken wire or something along those lines. And if I don't find anything, then I'll pull the upper intake, change the rest of the spark plugs. I still got 3 spark plugs to change on the far bank, and while I'm in there, I'll do a resistance check on the fuel injector, and if the fuel injector resistance checks bad, I'll replace it, but I'm guessing it's going to check good, and then I may replace it anyway. I might just spend $73, put a new Motorcraft fuel injector in there with new O-rings, and button it all back together and just see what happens if I can't find any fault in the wiring.